Alrighty, we are recording.
Is that like Letty started? She had this. Oh.
Hi everyone, you alright? My name is Vicky. I'm the facilitator for the Cleanliness, Drug and Alcohol group. What I'm going to take you through today is just a real brief history of how the group got started, quickly touch on its purpose, and sort of a summary of what it's done, or what the group has done over the past year, especially in relation to the liquor law reform that is going on at the moment. So quite a few years ago, there were a series of community conversations. Here we have the charades, the Cleanliness Random Household Survey, Cleanliness Visioning. I won't go into what those all look like, but what I will say is that from those community conversations, there were a lot of themes that the community wanted action around. One of them was around young people. They really valued young people in the community and saw them both as something that needs some work on and also the solution. A response to that part of the conversation was the formation of the Eastside Youth Network. Another conversation strand that came out was the community wanting better outcomes around health. And so the GI Health Project was a response to that community conversation. There was another one, well there's quite a few strands, but there was another strand about the harms of drugs and alcohol in the community, and especially as how they relate to young people. There was this young person's spin on the topic that there is a concern for drugs and alcohol harms in general, but a greater concern about how that affects our young people. So it went to the Eastside Youth Network, and the Eastside Youth Network said, oh well, yeah, that's good, it's probably more of a health sort of thing, and the Health Project took up the conversation, but well now there's a very strong youth emphasis in this subject. And by their powers combined, about 5 years ago, they had a love child, and it was called the Cleanliness, Drug and Alcohol Group. And so the Cleanliness, Drug and Alcohol Group is made up of youth service providers, health service providers, and local residents. Their purpose is a lot of words, but I'll sum up that by saying that the purpose of the group is to provide a space in which community can have these conversations and then support the community through actions that seek to minimize the harms of drugs and alcohol, especially with young people in the Cleanliness community. There's a lot of overlap between Cleanliness, Point England, Panmure. It's a very mobile community between those spaces. People have family in the different suburbs. So although it's called the Cleanliness Drug and Alcohol Group, the group is always inclusive of the wider whānau in the area. The group has employed, in recent times, two key strategies. The first is developing youth leadership, which has resulted in the Changes Youth Movement. And they did that as a way of building up protective factors amongst our young people in our community, taking a strengths-based approach. And that in itself is a completely different presentation, because what I will focus on is the second strategy, which is influencing national policy. So in April of last year, the group had a community forum here at the lovely Cleanliness Community Hall. And it was in response to the review that was being done around the Sale of Liquor Act at the time. So they held this community forum to us people. You tell us, how has the legislation affected you, affected this community? How has alcohol as it is at the moment contributed to whatever might be happening in your life? And through those conversations, there were some key things, and one of them was people were saying, you know what, if we had the choice, we would not choose this for ourselves. We would not choose to have a liquor store next to our schools. We would not choose to have one opposite from our marae. We would not choose to put them next to each other. What they were echoing was this idea of a local alcohol ban. That communities should have input into the location, the density, and as well as the operating hours of liquor outlets in the area. They also talked about young people again, and we're calling for an increase in the age. Having seen the effects of when it was lowered, the community felt, well, that didn't quite work out. Another one was around price. The community felt that, you know what, we don't mind a beer at the barbecue, but when it's so cheap that you can drink all weekend long, there's something a bit wrong about that. And so here's an example of a promotion by Fenchurch Liquor, the famous Fenchurch Liquor, which is the country's largest independent liquor outlet, which also shares the same block as our local high school. And here their latest special is, you can't see it, 24 RTDs for $24. It's $1 a bottle. Cheaper than water, or cheaper than milk. Advertising, sponsorship and promotion. The community also felt that, well, look at it, sadly. Not only is it environmentally something that is constantly in your face, but the insidious nature of it is that it works towards bringing our young people who walk past these things every day into this sort of lifestyle. They also talked about, well, what are some other harms that come about from this? And so they called for better restrictions around the driving limits. And another thing that came up was, well, okay, so what if someone in my family has a drinking problem? Who can I call? Where can they go? And so they were calling for increased access to treatment services. So if you're familiar with Professor Doug Salmon's 5+ solution, you'll see that, well, it's actually the same thing. But I'd like to point out that these conversations were held before the community was aware of Doug Salmon's 5+ solution. So it's quite interesting to see that in the academic sphere and in the community sphere, everyone's actually saying the same thing. So from those stories that the group heard and collated that day, they put it into a written submission and sent it off to the Justice Select Committee, where they were also invited to come and make an oral presentation, which was last year. And I can tell you that in that room, the whole room was full of people from Glen Innes, Point England, and Panmure. The main theme for that oral presentation was to whittle it down to some key points. And the first one was, we know you, politicians, work really hard. And you're working really hard to make a better New Zealand. And we in the community are doing the same thing too. That this submission isn't about us giving you a kick or telling you should do this or change that, but it's an opportunity for us to work together towards a better New Zealand. And the main point that we picked up on was that point about local alcohol plans and telling them, you know what, if we had a choice, we would not choose this for our children, for our young people. And we know that in your communities, you wouldn't choose that too. Then the Law Commission got involved and they started off their review. We had an opportunity to meet with Sir Geoffrey Palmer, President of the Law Commission. And here we have Tess Leo, one of our members, and also a young man from Tamaki College, Sam Siaki. Sam was the man on the day. He gave an example that tied together all the different aspects of the legislation that the community was talking about. So Geoffrey Palmer asked him, what are the drinking habits like at your school? Oh, well, you know, people come to school drunk or they have beer for lunch. They what? They have beer for lunch? They come to school drunk. He was genuinely surprised. So Sam put it into some context and said, well, there's a liquor store right next to our school. It's real cheap, so we can afford it. Most of the 7th form is 18, so no one's breaking any laws. The opening hours are such that you can get your Woodstock on the way to school and still be on time for the class. And when we're surrounded by advertising telling us to do it, and get in there, and be part of the in crowd, and be cool, and that these things will make you the man, then